seconds. Alright, everybody. Hey, guess what? It is Sunday, November 25th, 2018, and, well, it's Education with Ed. We're going to be talking about the 14th Amendment and the corporate backstabbing that they like to do with it. And, just on a side note, evidently our southern border is in trouble of being breached by the illegal immigrants. They may claim that they're not criminals, but if they're illegal or unlawful, then they're criminals. So, Ed, why don't you take it away?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that's what we're going to be talking about, the 14th Amendment tonight, that has major, major effect on what you're living right now today in your life. And this is the one thing that people have to come to the reality of the conclusion of facts, not fiction. We are not a Disney show. We do not care about imitation Disney or anything else. We don't care about all that other crap. We care about the Constitution and the treaties that gave us natives the lawful right to be separated from immigration. The United States is not open to the world. We are not a country of immigrants. I don't give a damn who lies and cheats and steals from you and try to claim that we're a country of immigrants. We are a country that has been invaded, and we're a country that has been continually having terrorists coming to our country. And the Democrats have been allowing this because they buy each other off and pay each other. It's like public lands. Public lands cannot be sold, period. End of story. But they do it all the time because they've got all people think about themselves. They don't give a shit about God. You fantasy people would talk about God. Come on. God rapes, robs, and pillage. We're living that today. We're being invaded. Oh, God is supposed to save us. Who's God? What God? Why God? No disrespect to religious people, but I mean, when it really comes down to life, it comes down to the point of what is real, and that's what we are living right now today. What is real? And right now, I was supposed to get a videotape to the producer because we have done that. I just got a live deal that I just put up on New Oregon Trackers Facebook. It's on the United States Republic Elected and Public Servants Oversight Committee. It's on Recall Cape Brown, and it's on the Civil War 1866 Lawful Bloodline American Facebook sites. It is posted on those Facebook sites. It was live when I just received that. About an hour and a half ago, was sent to me. It was live. They were actually filming them breaching the border. And see, when they're telling you that these people are not breaching the border and all these people, it's like a lot of these, just got an update. Border Patrol agents forced to get physical with being invaded right now. So we have a right to do this. Okay, this is our country. People don't have a right to come into our home, your home, and ask for something, demand something. They don't have a right to be on our soil. And all these people that sit there and ask you to plead sympathy for them, are they sitting there growing your food? Are they tending to you? Are they paying your water, electricity bill? Then why are you paying theirs? That's the one thing that people have got to start waking up to what's really going on. Why are you paying this stuff for these people? Nobody pays your bills. Nobody cares about you. Nobody gives a damn about you, do they? It's not being rude or disrespectful, but when people get in a hard spot, that's when you get to find out who's really there. And, we get that on the whole time, every time. And the public employees in these churches are only there so they get your autograph and to put you in the system, to keep you in the system so that way they can run off the birth certificate bond. Now, there is a new group that is going around trying to tell everybody and convince everybody that the birth certificate bond is not real. I just want to let you know I've done some investigation into the group, and we'll eventually get them up, but there are groups up there. But it turns out they are lawyers. So they're panicking because people are waking up and not spending money on them. They're educating and filing their own court cases. So people are waking up. Things are gradually improving. And that's the one thing we've got to do is start improving. I've been posting the stuff on the income tax, dealing with the 13th, 14th, and when we get to the 16th Amendment coming up the week after next. Because the 16th Amendment was never passed, never ratified. It's all fraud. It's a lie. And we'll get into the real history of that in 2 weeks from tonight. But this is the one thing with the 14th Amendment was never passed, was never ratified. It was passed administratively. Okay, and that's the one thing that people have to realize. It was passed administratively, but it still had meaning when it was passed administratively, because we sat there and passed it so that way people know what the truth is. And that is the point. People get to know what the truth is. They passed it administratively to protect their families that came into the country at that point. They knew the structure of fifth and more generations. They knew about the structure of the 1770 Immigration Act that was ratified in 1778. And you get all these Democrats and these news media out there and these young Turks that are idiots out there telling you that this stuff doesn't exist. It does too exist. Do your research. You don't believe me? Do your research. Okay, it's like when people sit there and call yourself a sovereign citizen. What is a sovereign citizen? If you are a citizen, you are a corporation member under the Vatican, under whatever religion fantasy you want to live. Okay, and that's what it comes down to, is that you're saying that you are a member of some organized group, and so that way you don't have basically constitutional rights, because you're giving your rights over to some corporation to dictate to you how to live. And this is the one thing that comes down to the reality. It's been proven. It's getting more and more proven. The evidence is more and more on the internet. People are putting this stuff together very well. And this is the one thing they're not enjoying, that the evidence is coming out. But you have to file this stuff. It's like I've been talking to numerous people, and it's like people are going, well, what do you mean file? I said, do you own yourself? And then they get into some deal of, yeah, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, well, how do you know you own yourself? That's the point. How do you know? Did you file? Did you claim yourself? Did you make it publicly known? And so when you do an affidavit and making something publicly known, let's make sure that the general public gets the concept of this. You have to put it on the police bulletin board. You have to make sure it's put on the county commissioner's bulletin board. You have to make sure it's served in the city and county meetings. You know, you walk in, they have a public meeting, just serve them. But make it public knowledge, because once it becomes public knowledge, and you can run it, if you have the resources, run it in the local newspaper. Make sure you get a certified and certified copy, registered certified copy of which you ran in the paper. And when you do that, you make sure you register that with the city, the county, and the state. Oh, then they can't say that you don't have rights at that point. See, the thing is that we have to protect our rights. And the Democrats and the Republicans know this, and they're waking up because they don't want you to do your rights. Because, I mean, trust me, I'm very familiar with this, very familiar, because when I started my filing on my rights in the state of Oregon, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, when I was getting this stuff done, all of a sudden everybody at the Secretary of State's back then started getting nervous, because I had two employees tell me that stated that to me that Kate Brown says you can't do this anymore. And I'm like, well, I'll just file my paperwork. And they're like, well, Kate says you can't do it, so we won't do it. So this is the one thing that people are getting to the point where, yeah, where's the enforcement? And I have to agree with a lot of men and women. Where are public servants doing enforcement? You know, we all hear all these fantasy talks. You know, we hear all these fantasy talks. But see, the bottom line comes down, what is the truth? And see, that is the point that you have to prove to what the truth is. All right, you have to prove that you're lawful or illegal when you go to court. Are you in an Article 1 court or Article 3 court? This is the stuff that is so important to know what court you're going into. Because if you don't know what court you're in, how do you supposed to just address the corporation puppet? You can't call him a judge because he's not a judge. He's an administrator for whatever agency that he wants to claim that he's involved with at that point. So these are the things that come out to the real facts of the point that we're living today. And so this is the other disturbing part. You know, how do you solve the issue? How do we prevent these problems? Well, we've started doing that. You guys know how to prevent it. Write your affidavits. Make sure they get published. That is the one thing that has to be done. It needs to be published. And the only way to get it published, and you could actually go to a printer and have them do a binder book of at least minimum of 10 copies. Yeah, it could run you up to a couple $100 or $150, depends on how many pages, and have it binded. Remember, you want a certified copy of your own book binded. That's a legal document in court. But remember, you know, you have to be liable. You can't write fiction in this stuff. You have to be writing all factual evidence. And see, they don't want you to comprehend this. And this is the point with the 14th Amendment that we have right now. See, the 14th Amendment was never, ever ratified. And I've been saying that for years. And I've argued with so many people. It's an administrative rule. Because, see, when it comes down to it, you know, everybody wasn't given freedom unless you applied for it, unless you did it, unless you made sure the freedom happened to you. If you didn't make sure freedom happened to you, you were not free. And I've put the laws and regulations up in the flyers that are going out right now, that I'm doing right now, and what I passed out to most people on the internet the last few days. And so we've got the laws up there. We've got the statutes and codes up there. And that is the one thing that you need to start producing your facts of who, what, why, and who you are. Because everybody's going, oh, we don't have to do that. And everybody's going like the 23 skedoodle that goes ahead and what is that 23-something club that, you know, you put in your information to get your DNA. Okay, and that's the one thing. They're getting your DNA to know who's lawful and legal in this country. And they're doing that so that way they can see who else is lawful and legal in other territory countries. So they get to basically decide on basically when it comes down to it, and you all been reading on this, and you all been trying to figure this one out, but who has the right to live or die? FEMA camps and stuff. This is what the reality is. So they're having you pay for all this stuff for them, and it just amazes me how people pay all this stuff, jump through these hoops, and do what these people want for them. And you guys pay for this stuff, for the information that they want to have to use against you. You get this stuff, then you publish it, you put it out there, you make sure it's known to the world or to your friends and families and everybody else around you. And then you wonder why these things happen. Well, you know, you got the information out there and you cuss it. So these men and women are smart. They get you walking in and out. So, like the 13th Amendment was the last one that was ratified. Was the last one that could have been ratified even before and after the Civil War. The 14th could never have been ratified, but it was done administratively, and we do have the paperwork from the House and Senate that even congressional records prove it. And so that's what we have to do, is go by the evidence of fact. We don't have time for games. I mean, what's going on, especially with our country is being invaded right now, we don't have time for games. I mean, we're literally being invaded from a foreign country, from other foreign countries. And you people are not even comprehending what the truth is. What the 14th Amendment really means for you guys. You're not comprehending how to protect your bloodline, your home, your soil. I mean, and if you don't post on your property or your soil and you're claiming private land, if you don't post that and it's not publicized with your local police department and your local sheriff, you're saying the county owns your land, not you. And you think they know this fact? Yes, they do. I've put it up. I have the records up. I've done it myself. It's in my own newspaper articles that I've put up. It's been filed in the Oregon State House and Senate that I have filed in my own structure in this. It's been filed in the public hearings at the Oregon State House and Senate. And so, and thank you, Guy. You know, we've got it on the YouTube video so you can actually see what's being put up on the 14th Amendment. This is congressional record we're putting up. This is not something that we came up with and wrote. This is out of Congress. This is congressional records. So the whole point about this is that, you know, our education group, and what we do is we educate each other. We're filing the paperwork. If we don't figure out how to file the paperwork to educate ourselves to file it and make our boo-boos and deal with those things and then come back to, you know, show you guys one way or the other what's right and what's wrong. See, these are the things that are making things happen right now today. You know, the facts of these things are happening, and it is working. And that is the one thing that is majorly happening that is happening. When you look around, Donald Trump came out and said that immigration have no rights, period, end of story. Now, that information was passed around to Congress, and I know because I passed it around, called many congressmen, many senators, aides, and, you know, oh, Ed, why, and I've even had a few of them said, Ed, why would you want to ruffle the feathers on this? And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't believe I heard them say that to me. You know, why would I want to ruffle the feathers on this when it's like, here's the law, we don't want them in our country, you know, and then it's like, and then I hear this crap about, you know, oh, well, you're a 14th Amendment citizen, aren't you? Are you a citizen? No, I'm not a citizen. I'm a lawful bloodline native. So if a public servant asks you if you're a citizen, or are you whatever nationality you want to put a claim on? Because remember, the 13th Amendment is about title and nobility, so if they put a claim on you. So lawful bloodline native, hey, I can prove my heritage by blood. I don't have to claim a title and nobility because I'm not joining the combination of the British government in their religious belief. I don't believe in the religion of anything when it comes down to that structure. I believe the Constitution, because the Constitution was the one that men put together that already lost their rights, who already lived that living hell, who've been there and proven what they have lived and what they have lost. And that's what they came when they came to this country and put the Constitution together. They already lived it. They've already lost it. They've already proven this. And so this is the point that these men and women have already done this structure. They already lived it. And so, and this goes back, and everybody like, and oh, the other point I got to just jump off here for a minute dealing with arms. If you go back, it was called the pickle or picket. I'm trying to remember the actual term. I know I get it. But, you know, machine guns have been around since actually 1699 through the 1700s. And people say, well, our forefathers never mentioned to have high-capacity rounds or this gun or that gun. I know people are not educated. Sometimes I have to realize that instead of calling everybody ignorant or ignorant or stupid. But read the real history. And if you go by emotions, you've already lost. You've lost everything because then you're not rational, even in your own life. You're not rational. So, I mean, you know, we have to come back to the reality of what we're living today, the circumstances that are dealing with our circumstances that we are living today. I mean, right now we have to deal with food, water, shelter. And then you've got the elected and public employees telling you if you grow food, that's a crime. If you collect rainwater, that's a crime. If you want to get off their grid system, that's a crime. Okay, well, if it's a crime for you, this is where the 14th Amendment comes in, because it was never ratified. File criminal charges on these men and women. It's your responsibility. And if you go hire an attorney, you give up your rights. Attorney's going to charge you a minimum $5,000. They always ask for cases like this, minimum $10,000. The average cost of a case is $50,000 to $225,000, and nobody wins. Now, if you get into the $500,000, yeah, you could win, but you get a settlement and, a praise agreement. You don't want any of that stuff. You want to file, get out of it, prove that you're lawful, and you don't want to be involved. Your system is voluntary, just like your taxes. I've been putting that around. I've been arguing with people all over the internet about, oh, you need to pay your taxes. And the law says you have to pay your taxes. And I ask them, what law they go by? And if you don't get it, there's a good movie video, Fashion to Freedom, out there. There's a lot of good videos out there dealing with taxes that are fraud, including former IRS agents have been convicted, and then they had their convictions overturned, and they were paid lawsuit money because they proved by their own structures that there was no law on taxes. The 16th Amendment, we'll get to that one in 2 weeks, was never ratified. Not only that, it could not be ratified, number one, and that violates the original and basis of the Constitution and Foundation. So this is the point that we are dealing with on the circumstances. What's right? What's wrong? How are we dealing with these circumstances? And, knowing what the amendments mean. Because this 14th Amendment was never ratified, could not have been ratified, and when they did pass this thing, it was administratively done, and if you actually read real history, you will find out under the 13th Amendment, basically everybody is still a slave. And as soon as I pull this back up and get back online, I'm going to read this part to you. And that's what it basically comes down. And basically, they put everybody into a slave structure under a vessel under the 13th Amendment. And that was secured by the 14th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment made sure that elected and public employees cannot be judges or attorneys and what's going on today. And judges are not supposed to be attorneys, and judges technically are not supposed to have been attorneys by the original structure of the administration court when it was set up. They cannot be participants in our structure, and that's where people are not comprehending that. So anyhow, I want to get into these videos, and then I'm getting ready to send this up. I just got this other one sent to me. Border Patrol agents forced to get physical on 100 immigrants. This was just sent out at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And basically 2.5 hours ago, this other one was just sent, and this is by the Association Press. So I'll get that sent to, and we'll see what happens in that direction. But at least you'll have it. And so, anyhow, let's hit the video. Let's get into this, and then I got a couple of things I want to read, and then we want to get into open the floor.
All right, just give me a little bit of time here, and get it going. All right.
Hey guys, Ding Dong Learning is here. I'm Mr. Hughes and this is Noam Chomsky. In the next few minutes, we're going to take you on the ride of your learning life. Not necessarily. But we are going to try to cover the 14th Amendment. So if you're a United States history student in an American government course, middle school, high school, even maybe a college intro course, this lecture is for you. Or if you're just kind of crazy on the internet, we accept those types of people too. But either way, we're going to chop it up nice and easy and serve it on a bed of learning. So here we go. Get ready for the 14th Amendment. Context. Context is everything. So first you want to group the 14th Amendment with the Reconstruction Amendments. That means it was passed following the Civil War. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. That was passed when Abraham Lincoln was still alive. And then when the Radical Republicans took over the next Congress by 1868, they were ready for using the 14th Amendment as a way for the southern states to re-enter the Union. So therefore it's kind of a coerced amendment. It's not a naturally flowing amendment. But nevertheless, it's written into the Constitution. And anybody who wants to complain about that should probably be ready to give Manhattan back to the Native Americans. But nevertheless, it is in the Constitution. So what does it really say? It really deals with the problem that the Supreme Court dredged up under Dred Scott. In 1857, right before the outbreak of the Civil War, the Supreme Court kind of solved once and for all the issue of slavery by determining that all African Americans, or Africans that were brought to America, are not citizens of the United States. So, you know, years before that, Congress, during sectionalism, had kind of tried to put Band-Aids on the problem and tried to solve it with popular sovereignty and with Missouri Compromise lines. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court, by deciding African Americans were not citizens, that kind of probably sped up the reasons for the Civil War. But nevertheless, the 14th Amendment is designed to correct that Supreme Court decision. All right, so let's look at the 5 sections. We're going to come back to Section 1, which is really kind of the entree of the 14th Amendment. The second part, or the second section of the 14th Amendment, is meant to kind of correct the 3/5 compromise, to make sure that we kind of rephrase that now all citizens, except for Native Americans, are going to be counted towards, you know, full representation. The third section goes to kind of a punitive measure against the former leaders of the Confederate America, which is going to prohibit them from serving as kind of leaders in Congress or in, you know, representation in Washington. So they're not going to be allowed to do that unless they get like 2/3 of Congress's vote. The 5th section basically says that Congress has the ability to enforce these previous 4 sections, but it's Section 1 that's the important one. So we're going to read it out loud. We might break it up a little bit, but we're definitely going to put it up on the screen for you. So here we go, 14th Amendment, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. Okay, so there you go. Dred Scott is dead, right? So therefore, everybody that was born in the United States, which means all slaves who were born here, are automatic citizens. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdictions the equal protection of the laws. So therefore you have kind of 2 sections, you know, saying everybody gets equal protection, states give your citizens equal protection, and don't mess with due process. All right, Plessy v. Ferguson. This is the big one, right? Plessy v. Ferguson is 1896, and it's the first chance that the Supreme Court has to basically use the 14th Amendment to protect a black person from their state government. This is, you know, the test case in federalism and civil rights. And the Supreme Court drops the ball. The Supreme Court states that separate could be equal, that separate but equal in a sense, that if the Separate Car Act is saying, you know, blacks on this train and whites on this train, that doesn't mean that they're not equal separate halves. Now, of course, that's just laughable looking at the surface and the reality of the situation in the South. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court, by doing that, is basically saying that Jim Crow is constitutional. So, therefore, we're going to have, you know, decades and decades of Southern legal segregation discrimination. Incorporate some of those other amendments using the 14th Amendment. So for instance, in Ohio, a court case called Mapp versus Ohio, when the police barge in on Miss Mapp without a warrant looking for a suspect, and Miss Mapp was an older lady, and she stuck the fake warrant down her bosom, and the police probably didn't like that, you know, too much, so they started digging through her house and they found pornography. Yes, I said old lady and I said pornography, ew. But nevertheless, that was evidence that was used against her in a trial. So when she goes to the Supreme Court and states, hey, they didn't have a warrant, basically she's saying the Fourth Amendment has been broken, but so is the 14th, because my state is denying me due process. That's called selective incorporation of the Fourth Amendment. And you have other court cases like Miranda, where they read suspect their rights, and where everybody gets a lawyer, Gideon versus Wainwright, and happy day, the 14th Amendment. And of course, the 14th Amendment hasn't been kind of trying to be expanded, and now there's court cases that are going to the Supreme Court dealing with gay marriage, and gay Americans who are saying that if you have a different set of laws for my people, then you're violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, right? That would be great, because I want to live like an EDU gangster. You also want to the other gurus down there that are doing some really great things in some of the other disciplines, and I put some links to some EDU geniuses that'll just make your brain wrinkle from here to the moon, whether it's Crash Course or ViHard or Vsauce or Smarter Every Day. There's just there's so many channels I don't even know what to say anymore. So where attention goes.
All right, I did some research, and I apologize about the block thing. The internet had some trouble, so if you really want to know what this guy says, go search Hip Hughes 14th Amendment. Now, there was a group called Radical Republicans back in that day, and it is true. So, Ed, why don't you take it away?
All right, thank you. Yeah, I want to get into this one because people don't get it. When he's talking about the 14th Amendment, they changed the large C to the small c, the Constitution citizen to the slave citizen. So when you go to jail and you go to court and you don't apply and claim that you are the injured party, the corpus delicti, Title 183771, you're not the injured party. You're a corporation member of the 14th Amendment that was never ratified. And we do have certification. The producer's been running that up through, I don't know, YouTube channel, Oregon Trackers, so you can actually physically see it. So people don't realize that it's a scam. And the guy, this Hughes guy is a public employee. So he's a Democrat. He can't tell you all the truth. That's like the 13th Amendment was ratified. And so there's no such thing as attorneys, doctors, lawyers, or any of it. But let me give you a point here. 62 stat. 772. 18 USC. 1583. And this dealing with the enticement to slavery. So the thing is that slavery has been in the original Constitution, and that was part of the passed in 17. That goes back to the structure that was passed in 1779, 1787. I mean, and so when you look at what's going on here, okay, dealing with that, and then 15 USC 1. And I'm giving you this stuff because I want you guys to start researching and reading this. This goes with conspiracy, okay? Trading under commerce. So what is that? Didn't Trump sign in December 27, 2017, a thing called human trafficking. So this stuff has already been in the point, and also, too, if you really want to get into it, you can go look at the Libra Code and the Libra Code 46. It's even in the Libra Code in numbers 46. And so this is the one thing that, looking at the Libra Code, looking at these structure, because, see, these men and women don't have a right to come in your house. Okay, and that's the one thing they don't. And then when you look at, and here goes the other point, dealing with 62 stat, 725, USC 641, public, you're going to love this, public money, property, records, embezzles, steals, dollars, and selling of other stocks and bonds that are not yours, And that could even get you into jail and prison for 10 years. So when your elected and public employees are billing you when you go to court, when they're kidnapping and holding you for ransom, you go to a court case and they get you this traffic ticket. You got 18 USC 641 public money. They're embezzling public money. They're creating false public record. In other words, it's called, what do they do to all of us all the time back to court? Contempt of court. And remember, you can tell a judge he's in contempt of court too. Putting them into contempt of court. Hang on a second. I got to take this. Take it over for me, host.
All right. I don't know about the contempt of court and everything, but as you can see clearly on the website, on the YouTube, if you're watching YouTube, effectively this is a congressional record. Proceedings and debates of the 90th Congress First Season, Volume 113, Part 12. June 12th, 1967 to June 20th, 1967. This is on new.oregontrackers.com. It is on the front page, right here, as you can see it. It's right on the, underneath the header, I guess you could call it. You back in?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I was dealing with the circumstances. I didn't know if it was emergency or not, but it was, anyhow. But anyhow, but this was the other point. It comes down to 15 USC 1. Impediments of contract, and that's Article 1, Section 10. I mean, all this stuff, people don't get all this stuff dealing with the 13th, 14th Amendment and the corruption that does this. And may I remind you, you are ruled by debt by a British Maritime Admiralty Statute Codes and Administrative of color of law that is not law. Because they're not going by color of law, they're going by statute codes and administrative rule of religion, Vatican Church. Number 2, the Crown, Christians religion, Vatican Queen of England Corporation, since and founded 1878, that was still in 1960s merely a corporation, and it still exercises no political power. Even though they're registered and all this stuff, but remember, they're a foreign corporation trying to convince us of their religious belief for us to live under their mind control. Natives don't believe in that. We know what the tree is. We know what the earth is. We know what the food and vegetables are. We know how to survive. Leadership of title of nobility that goes into the 13th and the 14th. Out of publish, not non-for-profit means norms. Virtually capital registration, birth certificate to the city, county, and state corps. And so that's why, if you go on to new.Oregon Trackers, we do have that. Go look at the how to own your child. Read it. The laws are there. It teaches you if you want to own your child or not. And remember, you cannot legally sign a Social Security card for your child because the child cannot sign anything until it's 18 years old, period. End of story. And if people really want to be crazy, they could actually go on people who have got a Social Security card for their children and file criminal charges on them because they can't sign because that's forgery. See, this is the one thing. Once you start and you're putting all this stuff together, with the fiction of religion nonprofit corporation with the Vatican Crown controls. Say all your religion and your entire world structure that's nonprofit is run by the Vatican in Rome through all your churches. And I mean all religions are controlled out of them. All of the nonprofits are registered and filed with them. So That is the one thing you can't get. And you go to Secretary of State, even your own state, look at the Secretary of State's paperwork. When you go to register a nonprofit or religious organization, it says it right there. It's so simple. See, that's the one thing that is so simple that it just amazes me. And it's like the 14th Amendment. This is where Donald Trump is coming from. The 14th Amendment was never certified. It was never ratified. It was never passed. Technically, it couldn't have been passed even at that time. So under USC code, the president does have statutory authority. That means under the Constitution of the original Immigration Act that I have posted up, shared with everybody. Excuse me. He does have authority, and that's under 8 USC 1182. He can close the borders, and that's what we want. We don't want this invasion. We don't have the right to take all these people in because we don't have the food to feed them. And it's your problem. You guys don't have gardens in your home to feed all these people coming in. Everybody says, let's let all these people come in. Hey, you can't do it. How do you expect to feed them? You don't want them in your home eating your food, so what's going on here? See, we have to be realistic on this stuff. Because all these Democrats are whining, oh, we need to open up the borders. All these Christian groups, oh, we need to care for these people. I'm a Christian, I'm a Mormon, or whatever you want. Grow the food. If you want them in your home, then take care of them. Otherwise, it's not my responsibility to take care of somebody else. That's not my responsibility. And the same goes to you and for you, because, what are you going to do? Give up your bed, your children's bed and food for somebody else? See, and also, too, under human capital, William Jefferson Clinton, Executive Order 13037, signed in March 3rd, 1997. Oh, you folks are going to love this one. This is when he signed over your Social Security payment for your employers over the Queen of England and made you human capital. So this comes down to Clinton signed under the federal budgetary, including use of capital of federal government. So if you're complaining to be a corporation citizen, you are capital. You have no rights. So when you go to these courts and you wonder why, oh, you're not getting your rights, you not only that, you haven't proven that you're a lawful bloodline native, or you haven't proved you're a legal citizen and paying all your structure that gives you basically the authority to have some authority to stand up on rights. As long as you pay it and don't cause personal and property damage to another living man, woman, or child, hey, as long as that you're going by the Constitution and not the war flag of America, putting the peace flag up and knowing the difference of what's going on in our country and the structure of what's going on from the peace and the war flag. Because everybody flags the war flag up and thinking, oh, I'm flying the American flag. Well, isn't that the same flag that, what was that, that happened, that big Indian war, Custer, Bull Run, people don't realize these flags and what they mean. And remember, it wasn't the Americans that fought the Indians. It was the foreigners that came over to this country, claiming it. We are not a country of immigrants. We're a country that has been invaded and terrorized by numerous groups. Anyhow, and also, too, dealing with the 14th Amendment, applies back to the 10th, the 9th, goes to the Immigration Act of 1917. And remember, the Immigration Act is the same structure of Trading with the Enemy Act. You have to read both of those. They're basically the same because the Immigration and Trading with the Enemy Act, and then it follows through with the 1938 Registration Act of Immigration of Public Employees. So if you're elected a public servant and if you're not registered with the Department of Justice, you can go to prison, and we expect you to go to prison. That's what we're filing on. A lot of us are doing that across the states now. and we're expecting these people to go to prison. We've got to get our public servants to start honoring their oath of servitude, or something's got to change. You know, because if we don't start standing up to these people that are destroying this country, you ain't going to have children. You ain't going to have nothing in the next 15 years, period. You're going to be extorted. You guys are going to be just shot and murdered, no different than what happened with Nazi Germany. That is not a joke. Read the damn plans. They've already put it out. They've passed them in the Senate and House bills, and nobody reads them. And that's the problem with most people. They don't get the reality because they live in fantasy. So the Supreme Court has definitely made a decision that no corporation or jurisdiction can be over natural man, or native man, or living man or woman. So that's the point that we've got to get this reality. Supreme Court of the United States, 1795. Every government agency is an artificial person. All right, so when you use that word person, you talk about a dead individual. You're talking about something that doesn't exist, live, and it's a fantasy. A person is not a living man, woman, or child. A person is a dead corporation, a dead corpse, and a fictitious of everybody's imagination of mind. And everybody types the word person in, you'll see the definition. They have changed the word person in a couple of dictionaries to what they consider a person is a definition of man, woman, or child, which that is not true at all. And that's what even Black Law Dictionary and all of them say it's not a fact. It's not a fact. An artificial person, corporation member, police department cannot write warrants or affidavits. Yeah, this goes even with even if there's a foreclosure that's created on somebody's property or property. And this is the point of reading this stuff, getting these laws out, working with each other. When we hear men and women going through this stuff, we need to start tag teaming, you know, and putting affidavits in and protecting people. Some of us are getting it. A lot of people want to do this, but then they only want to do it when it comes to them. And you got to remember, when people come to your aid, you got to go to their aid too. So you might not be able to physically be there, but you can always put something in writing or make sure something's there, and you know, to generally protect it, people. And always put in your instruments. Notice to principal, notice to agent. Notice to agent is notice to principal. And that's even with all your emails or anything, because, see, you want to be able to, you are the principal, the agent is the public servant. So you're letting them know the separation of basically lawful and legal in the structure of the circumstances of their administrative rules. And yes, under Electronic Communication Privacy Act, 18 USC 2510-2521 is a receipt. So if you do that and you're doing that, make sure, and I do have the electronic stuff we've been putting up too, especially if you're doing electronic receipts on court cases, notifying courts and stuff, you want to put that in, and you want to put the electronic point that on the law that I don't have in front of my face, but it's out there dealing with the corporation, because if we do file it, you want to include that the clerk has been notified. So if they don't file your instrument by their administrative rule by electronic communication, that individual who got the email is liable for it. And so that's the one thing. When you do emails and stuff, you always want to get back. You always want to get copies of stuff. Sometimes you can't get it recorded or certified, but if they email you back a copy of that, now you have recorded history going back and forth electronically. And so that does help. You got to look at how to come up with information to protect yourself, your bloodline, and the people around you. That's where it comes down to. And then we want to get into like 28 USC, U.S. Code 28. This goes into jurisdiction and knowing jurisdiction. So with the 14th Amendment, does not have jurisdiction. The 14th Amendment was never ratified, and we have the certified copy up. We've got it up. We've made sure that Congress got it. I put numerous little letters together, put them out over the last couple of weeks, So they're very aware of it. And remember, United States Section 3002 and that's under Public Health Law Article 30, and this is under New York State, is a corporation. Not a government agency, it's a corporation. We, the people, are the government. We have elected and public servants. And if they're not doing their servitude, that's where we got to start speaking up and get these men and women fired. And you cannot have compassion and sympathy for these men and women because they don't for you. And when you have it for them, and then you wonder why people's families get destroyed and all of this, is because of that compassion. Now, if they come back and they start really admitting that they made a mistake and fraud and collusion, whatever, and they're willing to make amends, and all right, and then they correct it afterwards, not only with your case but others, then there can be amends. But let's be realistic here, because we got these Constitution amendments that have been passed for us. We have others that are in administrative rule records. And administrative rules is what elected and public employees have to go by. Native Americans do not. And that's the point of setting up the structure of lawful bloodline native versus legal citizen, knowing what your bloodline is and knowing how your bloodline tags into, if you know your family's bloodline history, what war they fought in, what was their structure of belief growing up. And then you have to balance out those things for the time back then, but then you have to look at real history and come back to the realistic point of view of how we're dealing with this stuff today. There's a lot of things that we've learned today on religion and stuff, and we get to know things a lot differently than what we did. And so we have to take those things into consideration. Doesn't mean that we have to sit there and play these administrative attacking games that they keep doing to us, and they want us to fight and play these games. I mean, there's no such thing as racism, folks. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Let's start being adults. Let's start getting back to the realistic points of life. Racism, there's no such thing as racism in the Constitution. Constitution is equal. Even a woman has a right to her body, even abortion, and I don't want to hear, oh, God stuff. Because if you sit there and tell a woman she does not have a right to her body, then that way, man, you better look in the damn mirror, man, because you don't have a right to life yourself. You don't have a right to live. So you can't judge somebody else or to get into somebody else's life and invade their Constitution rights. And especially even if they're immigrants, their privileges of that. But that has to be proven. If something like that has to go to court. But when you're native, it doesn't go to court. And like I said, we do have the laws that we put up. We have the administrative rules that if you're a lawful bloodline American, you don't pay court fees. But this is the point, learning all this stuff, so we're educating ourselves. Anyhow, do we have another video, or should I just go ahead and start opening up the floor and see what we get going?
We should open up the floor. That's the only thing I can think of now. We don't have another video.
Oh, okay, no problem. And then we'll get into that. Let's get in to see what other people are thinking about on the 14th Amendment.
All participants are unmuted.
Any comments? We got nothing tonight, huh? Okay. Well, anyhow, let's remember. Go ahead.
Earlier you said something about that you don't have to go. We're not supposed to be going to Article 1 courts.
Yeah, that's your courts that are like for traffic tickets, or if the city writes you a misdemeanor because you farted in the wrong direction, or a neighbor made a false statement about you.
Okay, and also I was reading about this congressional record that it says, where is it? I didn't have a real page, but I was scrolling down. I was reading it. It said, Chief Justice Marshall pointed out that the unanimous court of Marbury versus Madison, the farmers of the Constitution can contemplate the instrument as rule of the government of the courts, as well as the legislators. Why does the judges swear to discharge his duties agreeable to the Constitution of the United States if the Constitution forms no rule for his government? If such be a real state of things that is worse than solemn mockery, to prescribe to or to take the oath becomes equally a crime. I mean,
Right?
Is that saying that they've made a joke out of all this? I mean, it's not. I don't know. I don't know how to put it, but I mean, it sounds like they've the whole thing is just it should be stricken and nullified with the 14th Amendment.
Well, okay. I'm just wondering, does anybody else got a thought before I respond on that? I'm just wanting to see if anybody else has got a thought. I'm sort of surprised. So, in other words, what you're saying on that is, it's one of those things that when it comes down to it, what he's telling you, okay, is that the 14th Amendment doesn't exist. We know that. We know it was never ratified. We know it wasn't even put out. It's a conflict of interest. The only one that has authority is the 13th and everything below it. But the point is getting our public servants to start acting on these things. That's why it is so apparent and a fact that you have to file the criminal charges on these men and women. Okay, and it even goes back to the structure of the 1787 Constitution, where, dealing with no title and nobilities and all that, because when the judge on the Mulberry case, and if you actually read the Mulberry case, the judge came out and claimed and stated he would not go against the Constitution because he had a constitutional conflict of his conscience of the oath he took to protect. And most of these elected in public take two oaths, and one is called to the Constitution or to support the Constitution. And that's why it's so apparent when you go to court, you ask to see the judge's certified oath. Does it support it, or does it say he has to go by the Constitution? If it says he supports it, that means he's a corporation member and he's out for his pocketbook. And that's so simple and cut and dry, because these guys are out for their pocketbook. I mean, I've been through that. I fought with these guys even here in my own county on that, proved them wrong. And I mean, trust me, I mean, I've had my cases thrown out. They've literally, even, when I got forced into paying ransom notes, I never got them back. Oh, they can keep them now. Even if you're never proven guilty, they can keep it for their own personal gain because they claimed it and they said you didn't claim it in 30 days, which I did. But this is how they're getting away with this stuff. It affects everything. And that's the one thing that we're going through. And so we got to learn these court cases and what these men and women are stating, and that's, you have to read their comments, too, in these court cases of what it means. And when it comes down to natural-born citizen, okay, the original structure of that, and that goes to Article 2, part of Article 5. Natural-born means on this soil. And remember, natural-born citizen was capital C, and that was before the 14th Amendment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just okay, because the light bulb went off in my head.
Yeah, I mean, when you read this stuff and you get to know what the large C is, or the capital letters, or the small letters, or when they're talking, the state, or they're talking land, they're talking above in the air and fantasy of a corporation versus soil and a living man or woman. It's all based on wording. And this is the point that we're all learning, we're all putting together. We have substantially grown in a lot of directions on this, and now we're getting at the point that way when we start putting these, everybody's putting their court cases together or doing this or educating their kids so they don't have to go through this stuff. And that's where we're going to get into the 16th Amendment, too, because, I've got stuff on that where it was never ratified. It couldn't have been ratified because it violated the Constitution, and the Constitution says that we shall not be taxed. But, we'll get that in 2 weeks. But, this is the one thing of putting all this stuff together. And when you get this huge guys going on, and like he's talking about the 14th Amendment like it was ratified when it wasn't, and it's administratively done, and what happened with the court case, with the circumstances of that court case, they still ruled the guy was a citizen because he never filed his right. He didn't prove he was American or Native or anything. He didn't make a standing, and that's how they get away with it on the 14th Amendment on you when you go to court. So that's why I always suggest to people, clarify who you are, know your standing, and also, too, clarify if the court has jurisdiction. And you want to know what the jurisdiction is they're claiming. And you want it in writing. And if they can't produce it in writing, it doesn't exist. So, and if they produce something in writing, either you might have something under Title 18 Code 2381 with a capital felony of treason. So, and that's plausible because they put something in writing on that, and they could set themselves up just to be filed on treason. So, in these court cases, some of them that when you file these criminal complaints on these men and women do go through. Some of them they hold and play games, and, but the only way they're going to start going through, if we start standing up and helping others out, speaking up when we see somebody down. That's the one thing about Facebook that's going around right now. There's a lot of stuff been going around on the border, and people are standing up, getting this stuff out, and people are waking up that this is real. Because all these other media companies out there, there's nothing to worry about. These people ain't doing that. They're not attacking us. Basically, we've been at war and shooting for the last 3 weeks on these terrorists. They think that these people have a right to come into your home and have a right to live. And this is the one thing, too, dealing with destruction. If you look at the Treaty of 1213 with the religious Vatican with the Magna Carta, it goes dealing with the bloodline of the structure of the Pope, King John. And everybody keeps going, well, why do you keep talking about the bloodline? Why does it matter, Ed? Well, it does matter because this affects what goes on in your home, your families. Your bloodline knows who you are. You get to know by your bloodline what place you are in this territory called the 48 states. Remember, Alaska and Hawaii is not part of we the people. They're corporation members. They cannot be part of we the people. That's already been proven. So, this is things that, we can't, worry about the little things. We have to deal about the stuff we have to deal with right now today that we're living. So, and that's the other point. I'm making sure you know about taxes and public laws, what public law says compared to administrative rules. Because, I've had people say, well, you can't use public law because it's copyrighted. No, there's a difference of administrative rule, of a statute code of administrative rule, and the public law is what they do by Congress. So, these are things that, people don't get, or it's difficult for them to comprehend this stuff. And so this is part of what we all live. So it's, but once we start getting this learning experience, we start putting pieces together. Anyhow, anybody else got anything? So I guess we hit the 14th Amendment, that you comprehend the 14th Amendment was never passed, never ratified. Immigrants have no rights. Their children have no rights. There's no rights of freedom for them or their fantasy of emotions. So, and that's the one thing. If you don't protect your home, your children, your bloodline, you're not going to have them. And that's the whole point, eliminate it, because these men and women already sold. They're sold to the highest bidder. So, and we can stop this stuff. We can make sure that, we have a country, but that's going to be coming up to about you doing that. And remember, dealing with USC 2381, dealing with debtor-slave and all that, we already dealt with that. When you put in your affidavit, you can always put that in, that code in, because that's called a debtor-slave. So dealing with any of that, you're not supposed to be classified as a slave, as some of these things in the 14th Amendment did classify men and women as corporation slaves for the benefit of the bankers. That's why when Woodrow Wilson passed the Banking Act, it screwed all of us. So, and it didn't screw all of us, because it screwed us, the ones that we didn't know about this stuff, until we learned about it. So it is protecting ourselves. It is putting these things together, and it's living this stuff. So, we have been making quite a bit of improvements, educating all of ourselves through this on this journey. So it is making sure the bloodline is protected, and that's your children. So, but anyhow, we have nothing else to add. I guess we will call it an evening. I guess we hit these things really, we're getting to the point where it's getting talked down real quick, and so we're moving real quick. So nobody else has got anything to add? Okay, with that, we're going to be starting to I'll be working with some groups coming up on some seminars we're working on contracts with lawful bloodline structure, to put that up and get some of this moving so people get the concept, because a lot of people are starting to give the reality of filing your rights, and like with Rob Ryder, his videos he's put up. We've got the Lighthouse Law Club. Please look at their videos. They're putting up a lot of good educational information. And so, and you got a lot of groups out there that are really starting to work together, putting education up. And that's the whole point where we are learning. People are getting this education out. It is for your protection, okay? And knowing what's going on for the future, knowing how to protect your bloodline. And once you got your bloodline protected and your assets, and that means, protecting your assets going down the road, so that way you have a future, protected. And so that way your land is protected. So if you end up in some place that is, not rational or reasonable, you don't want to end up in the corporation housing stuff, and you want your children to take care of yourself. The other point is that there's another group going on too called United Constitutional Patriots Radio, and listen to them. They got a lot of good information they're bringing up on the border structure, what's going on, because we got to start working with each other on these things. It's not about one or another group. It's all about us educating each other on what's going on around us with the circumstances of our country. And remember, our country is 48 United States. Alaska and Hawaii are corporation members. Alaska is still no man's land, and technically, if you go to Hawaii, is still, even though they separated themselves, part of their structure is still under the Queen of England. So, it's the real history, the real facts, and that's what we have to go by. And the more and more that we get that passed on and educating each other, the future is coming more and more to the general public. Anyhow, with that, I'd like to say good night. May the Great Spirit bless you. May Mother look over you. And may the Creator feed us and bless us all.
Thank you very much, Ed. It is Sunday, November 25th, 2018. It is currently 6:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And thank you for listening to Education with Ed. And remember, Ed says we have to get together and start working together and get things done. Yes, that is true. Now you may think, oh, well, we're so small, it doesn't really matter. Remember how this country was won with 3% of the population. A lot of people are called 3%ers nowadays because they believe it will only take 3% of the population to change things. But you have to be willing to put everything on the line. Not just do a weekend warrior thing. You have to be willing to push all the way to see it through. So, with that, we'll catch you next week when Ed's going to be talking about, I have no clue, and neither does he until it's pretty much a day or two beforehand. So, and then we'll be on the 15th Amendment next Sunday also. So, tune in then and we'll see what happens. Thank you very much.